Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show. Thank you so much for carving some time out of your Memorial Day weekend to listen into the show. I got on board the Byron Donald train very early. Byron and I met probably 12, 14 years ago or so. I think we were in Naples, Florida, and I didn't know who he was, and we struck up a conversation. I said, wow, this guy gets it. He knows what's going on in the economy. And next thing I know, he is a congressman, and he served so heroically in Congress as one of the leading voices for pro-free market policies. He is now running for the governorship of Florida, which you could say is probably like the third most important position in America behind being, I guess, governor of president of the United States, governor of New York, and then Florida is probably the most important state other than California. So, Byron, thanks so much for joining, my friend.
It's good to be with you, Steve. By the way, it's the second most important because Florida's better than New York, and everybody knows.
Yes. Well spoken as a well. You know, by the way, our flagship station is WABC in New York, but we're reaching stations all over the country, including in the great state of Florida. Well, let's start with that, Byron. I mean, first of all, Florida has a legacy of very, very good governors. Ron DeSantis has been fantastic, as you know, and Jeb Bush was an outstanding governor. And then you had who's now the senator.
Rick Scott.
Rick Scott. So, you know, those are tough acts to follow. They've done some amazing things. What would you say are your two or three highest priorities in the great state of Florida? You're seeing so many people come into the state. The one thing I hear people are sort of angry about, the insurance costs because you've had hurricanes. But what are the things that you are going to do to make Florida an even greater state?
Well, first is you maintain first principles. Law and order is going to remain a pillar of our state, common sense economic policy, in a low regulatory environment. You have to keep that stuff in place. That's the first order of business. Second order of business, you brought it up, insurance costs and property taxes. I believe there are ways where we can adjust Florida's regulatory system to still follow free market principles and actually have a more sound insurance market in Florida. Governor DeSantis did a great job with tort reform in our insurance market that has stabilized our insurance market. We're already seeing auto insurance rates are coming down very fast in Florida. We anticipate property insurance rates are going to come down as well. But it's time to look at that system and figure out the tweaks and the redesigns that are necessary to have it be even more efficient for Floridians today. And then with property taxes, I know the governor and the legislature are going to go back into special session pretty soon to see what they can accomplish. If they don't get anything done, we are going to pick up that ball and try to make sure that we either fully eliminate homestead property taxes or target real relief to seniors on fixed income and the working families in Florida who are the bedrock of our workforce. We want to make sure that they get as much relief as possible.
Well, I love that agenda. And of course, as you know, Byron, this is something you and I have talked a lot about. I'm talking to Byron Donald, who is of course the member of the House of Representatives from the sort of Naples area, Florida. You've got real leadership among all the states in school choice and letting kids go to the best schools they can possibly find, public, private, Catholic. And I was just reading a study that we placed in our hotline this week showing how well these kids are doing in the charter schools. They're outcompeting the traditional public schools. Is that something you favor? Can we continue to expand full school choice in Florida?
Yeah, we can continue to expand it, and we're going to maintain school choice. It's something that when I was in the state legislature, I fought for and wanted to see. But I think you have to take it one step further. We need to make sure that our kids, when they graduate high school, are mastering math, reading, and writing. And the second thing is for our kids who are not going to go into the college or university system, we want to make sure that they are getting the apprenticeships and the credentialing that they need to go directly into the workforce. You shouldn't have to graduate high school to then have to figure out, okay, now let me go get this certificate in order to get this job. We should be doing that in high school so that every kid has a launch pad into their career. We're going to have a major initiative around Florida to modernize our educational system to meet the demands that the industry and the economy is going to have for the future of Florida.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I think that's an exceptional idea. And look, I got I went to the University of Illinois. I got a degree in economics there, but not everyone needs to go to college. And if you become, let's say, a mechanic or electrician or something, you can make more money than college graduates are making. And so all we need to do is make sure these and college isn't for everyone, and allow them to go to those schools. Why is it that we're fully subsidizing universities for, on balance, the richer kids, but the kids who go to the trade schools maybe come from more humble families? They don't get any benefit. They don't get any scholarships.
No, it's totally true. And so, in Florida, the first wave of school choice was funded by a tax credit scholarship. My plan is to actually resurrect that corporate tax credit scholarship, but now for the purposes of vocational education, trades, and even going into the workforce. It doesn't have to be an electrician or a plumber. It could also be going into the field of a company that decides to relocate to our state. And so if you have that launch pad directly into career, whether it's a trades or any other career, all that does, Steve, it helps a kid graduate high school, begin to put food on the table and put a roof over their head, and they can begin that journey of building the Florida dream for themselves. And
I like that.
That's what we're looking at.
Well, I think my friend Gary Rabine. Do you not?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I do know
so Gary's story is such an amazing one. He grew up in suburban Chicago, as you know, and he was one of the few people in his graduating high school class that did not go to college. Almost everyone else did, and he tells a story about how all his classmates laughed at him and said, someday you'll be working for me. And of course, what he did was starting a little paving company, paving roads, and the next thing he's growing it, and now it's a multi-billion-dollar business. He's probably wealthier than all of the other members of his class combined who went to college. So there is a lot. You can build a business. Let's say you become an electrician, then guess what? You can start a company. And you can build, and you become an entrepreneur, and that's sort of what makes America great.
That absolutely is. And that's something that's available to a lot of kids. As I travel Florida and I talk to our business owners, a lot of our business owners, Steve, did not go to college. Or they were there for a little bit of time and left. They got on the job. They worked it hard. They figured out how to make it a business for themselves, and they just kept building it, just like you said. And so I think the key thing in America today, our young people have to know, and also our parents, the parents of our children need to understand, there are multiple pathways to success. In Florida, we want to maintain the strong foundational elements of making sure that you're mastering mathematics, you're mastering reading and writing skills, because that's the bedrock of being able to be successful in any economy. But we want to make sure that there is those multiple pathways that exist. It's not just going to college or university. And I got a finance degree. I have a marketing degree. I'm glad I graduated from Florida State. Those degrees help me be successful in life. But it's not one size fits all. We want to make sure that our kids are prepared for the future of Florida's economy, whatever that looks like, so they're prepared to lead and keep this grand experiment known as America and Western civilization alive and well.
So one of the things that I think you and I both believe very strongly in is especially as we celebrate our nation's 250th birthday, is the idea of federalism and letting states decide policies, not having all the policies driven by the folks in Washington, D.C. And Florida is a good example, by the way, as you know, how that works for us when states can make their own decisions. One of the issues we've been working on, and I just want to get your opinion on this, that we just put out a study at Unleashed Prosperity showing that the benefits of faster approval for drugs, pharmaceutical drugs, if we could get cancer drugs and drugs for epilepsy and drugs for stroke and other things out quicker, we could save the economy, literally $1 trillion, and we could save lives. So my point of all this is that what we'd like to see is maybe states having the authority to approve these drugs, not the FDA, which sits on them for years and years. And it's cruel that people don't have access to these drugs. I'm talking about drugs that could be for people with MS or Parkinson's disease. Why not, Byron, let people have the right to choose, if they want to use these drugs, and why not let the states make these decisions?
That's actually not a bad idea. I do like it. You're correct about the FDA, highly bureaucratic. Takes way too long. The another thing that I've been talking about with my policy team is what can Florida do to speed up the start of clinical trials. Clinical trials, no matter where you are, they are highly bureaucratic. What we want to do is looking at modernizing that regulatory system in Florida so you can actually start clinical trials more quickly and actually be able to work through that process to be able to take maybe a potential drug that can really help a lot of people to market. And so I think these are the common sense reforms that Florida is going to lead on into the future. It's going to be based majorly on modernizing our government and our economic systems.
Well, let's talk more about that offline, Congressman, because I think it could be a real winning issue in Florida. You have an older population there, and people, if they have Parkinson's, why would you deny someone a drug that could be beneficial to them? But before I know and by the way, so much appreciate you taking some time off on this Memorial Day weekend to talk to us. I'm a little angry at Congress. I'm a little bit angry at some of your colleagues in the Republican House that you guys aren't doing more. I'm not talking about you personally. I'm talking about the Republican caucus. I want a pro-growth message out of Republicans. People are upset about the price of things. As you know, you've been barnstorming around the state of Florida. People don't like paying $4.50 a gallon of gas. I want to see a growth message from the Republicans. Now, you guys passed that great, big, beautiful bill. But come on, let's index capital gains for inflation. Why don't we go back to pay-as-you-go budgeting? All these things that I know you believe in. Why are we moving forward with this agenda? Why are we just sitting on the ball?
My friend, I would love to do all of that, but we have this arcane system called the United States Senate. And the biggest problem we have in all of Washington is you have Senate Democrats who do not want pro-growth policies. They do not want policies that actually cut the cost. Like, I'll give you an example. Everybody wants to talk affordability. Well, let's look at housing. 30% of the cost of building a home in America today is government costs. It's government regulations and government costs. It's not the raw materials. If you want to talk about what it takes to require the raw materials, we have built a federal regulatory behemoth that increased the cost on us of getting raw materials. We're cutting our nose off to spite our face. And when you try to make these changes, Democrats say no in the Senate because of the Senate filibuster.
Well, the good thing is when you're a governor, you can help trim those regulations in Florida, because you're right, a lot of the excess cost is regulation. Hey, Byron, anything I can do to help you, let me know, because you will be an outstanding governor. You will be the next governor of Florida, and thanks so much for joining us. This is the More Money Show, folks, and we will be back in 2 minutes.
Thanks for listening to More Money with Steve Moore. You can hear More Money with Steve Moore Saturday afternoons at 1. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?